I'm Rick Munn. This is No Risk, No Reward Media. And today I'm very happy to be joined by Parallel Mike. Parallel Mike is two things. He's more than two things, but predominantly he's an investor and he's an organic farmer. We're not going to talk about organic farming today. We're going to talk about investing today. Mike, how are you?
I'm great, Rick. Yeah, it's lovely to see you on a new platform and setting up your own show. So I'm honored to be on. Thank you so much, my friend.
Well, it's nice to speak with you. We've been conversing back and forth for, almost 3 years now in some way, shape, or form on various broadcast media platforms. And today, what I want to talk to you about is an issue that's been a hot topic over the last few years. If you say the right things, you can get a lot of friends. If you say the wrong things, you can make a lot of enemies. I want to talk about this business of Bitcoin because it seems to be getting more and more exposure, especially post American presidential election results back in November. So you have a great Substack page. And by the way, all links and information on where you can connect with Mike will be in the description box underneath this video and also in a pinned comment at the top of the comment section of this video. But you wrote a piece recently on Bitcoin to the moon or the abyss. Very powerful title there. Bitcoin's highs and hidden risks. And we hear this expression a lot, Bitcoin to the moon, Bitcoin to the moon. Other people think it's going to tank and leave people with nothing. Will it be that extreme, or do you think it'll sit and occupy some form of middle ground?
Yeah, I think the thing with Bitcoin, Rick, is it's always just clear my throat. Yeah, it's always been one of those assets that people have been very passionate about, and that's because of its origins. Where it came from was a very small community that was predominantly made up of people who were anti-statist, so they were against the government or at least questioning it. They were anarchist in ideology. And that was the original core group. And then, of course, it had this very interesting arc. The narrative was very interesting. Firstly, nobody knew where it truly came from. There was this guy called Satoshi Nakamoto, or a group of people. And as the story developed, it got more and more attention. And it had these big bubbles where it had these big spikes and these big crashes. And that was very exciting for people because, of course, when there's money involved and people think, well, I can get rich off this. And so that's what really I would say was the carrot on the end of the stick for a lot of people. And then it kind of transitioned from being this anti-statist asset, which was to go against the state, to transact outside the traditional financial system, to give you this sovereignty that the system didn't want you to have, but you could use this asset. It was almost like a rebel asset. And then there was this weird pivot towards 2020, which is where it actually started to become a mainstream asset and be adopted by people who were part of the establishment. So, for example, Michael Saylor. Michael Saylor is a billionaire, very, very rich guy, and very much enmeshed with the system. He works, in fact, his company is an intelligence company, but a private sector intelligence company. So they do a lot of platforms for, like, for example, NASA, for the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Defense, the US Army. So he's definitely not anti-statist. He's about as statist as you're going to get. And the community embraced that. So they certainly are not skeptical. And that's kind of how it's changed. The community went from being these original anarchists to this crowd that are looking to get rich and to earn lots of money. And the narrative with Bitcoin, of course, is that that can still happen. That if you buy it now, you're still going to get rich. You rarely, because it's going to take over the world and everything's going to be priced in Bitcoin one day. But I am a little bit more cynical, which is why people have always they haven't really liked my take on Bitcoin, because I didn't jump aboard this kind of hyper optimistic take. And especially once I started to see it go away from the original purpose and towards this more mainstream view. And that's when I started to really warn people, wait a minute, guys, something else might be going on here. And potentially we're going to be taken to an end that's not good for you. It's not going to give you that sovereignty. And recently, I think that's really started to come into the fore. The kind of fog's cleared on that one. And then I'm now personally starting to feel like I really understand how they're going to use it, what it's been used for thus far, which in my opinion was building out this technocratic system. I call it CBDC Lite, not Bitcoin, but the whole crypto
Mhm.
space, all of these coins and ledgers. that they've been data mining, all of the digital infrastructure they've created. That really to me is CBDC light because once all that's in place, it's only a flip of a switch to get to CBDC real
Mhm.
because all everything's there, Rick. They can just switch it over. They can wipe out some of those assets, or maybe they'll continue to use them, like Bitcoin, for example. I know personally that if you try and get out of Bitcoin today, it's very hard to do so without a KYC, where you've got to give your ID and
Mhm.
go through a mainstream exchange. It can be done, but most people don't do it, and it's going to become increasingly harder, particularly if you go to digital IDs, for example, just
Mhm.
to access the internet, all things which they're planning for. So yeah, I'm starting to see personally that it's becoming something else, and I don't get that excited by the returns on it either, purely because, Rick, if you look at any asset, for example, if you go to, for example, Amazon stock is up around 300,000% from the start. But nobody says that. Nobody says, oh, you should have bought Amazon. Have fun staying poor. You didn't buy Amazon when it was first a company. Bitcoin's no different. It's like any asset. These assets start out tiny, they grow in size, and then at some point it tapers off.
Yeah.
Amazon's not going to go up 300,000% now, Rick, unless we have a hyperinflation. Then it might do it, but it'll be a worthless 300,000% gain. And I don't think Bitcoin's going to continue on this meteoric rise. That's to me why the narrative has to be so big. It has to be that it's going to take over the world to convince people to keep going in. But if you go into Bitcoin at 100K, to make 100%, not 300,000, to
Mhm.
make 100%, it has to go to 200K.
Yeah.
It's a
Yep.
huge amount of money. So I just think there are better opportunities. But I think for people in the mainstream, they are still seduced by those big numbers. And it could go to a million. I'm not saying that. I always look at things in terms of how much risk do I have to take on to
Mhm.
get that. And I would never buy anything at an all-time high. I always try and think like a value
Mhm.
investor. How can I buy something when it's undervalued, when nobody's talking about it? That's really how I was taught to invest. It's when nobody's interested, but there's something there. It's going to come back around. So, for example, Bitcoin, when it crashed from, I think it was $30,000 back down to four. Okay, there's an interesting opportunity there because you say, well, it's been up to 30. Now it's at three or four. There's an opportunity. And I actually know somebody who bought down there and he got 15 times his profit, a fantastic speculation.
Mhm.
But when it's at an all-time high for me, that's the least interesting time. And I'll pass it back to you, Rick. Take it where you want to go from there.
Yeah, just thinking about return on investment as well. They talk about, Bitcoin to $1 million, they see it going to $1 million, which it might. I'm not saying that it won't. And by the way, for anybody listening in here, I'm not hating on Bitcoin. I'm not telling you shouldn't be doing it. We're just discussing it here, the pros and cons, because very often you get people that hate it and they don't talk about any positive upside. And then you get people that think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread and they don't see any potential downside. So what I want to try and bring is a little bit of balance. And you touched on something very important there. To go from 100K to 200K is 100% return on investment, which by any stretch of the imagination is great. But if you look at even UK FTSE stocks, over the last 3 to 4 years. There's been some stellar performers there. Rolls Royce, for example, if you look at the share price for a big company like Rolls Royce, they were sitting at about 90p a few years ago. They're sitting at touched £5.50 this year. That's more than 500% return on investment just from a UK FTSE 100 company. Marks and Spencers is another one. 3 years ago they were 95p. They were cracking over £4 there recently. So the same thing. It's return on investment. Are you buying low and selling high? Or are you jumping in on a spike and then the market starts to tank and then people, if you're not an experienced investor, panic and they do things in reverse instead of buying low and selling high with value investment, they're buying high and then they panic when they jump on a bandwagon and then they see the ass fall out of it, then they sell out, and then people that are savvy, the value investors, are waiting, rubbing their hands together, going, "Well, I'll have that. Thank you very much at a big discount." So you've got to be aware of, risk versus reward. Plus, the value investing, I think, is something that's not being talked about in line with this Bitcoin business.
Yeah, and I think the part of that is just because it's impossible to value because fundamentally what people have to believe for it to have value is that it's gonna change finance in a way that is it's going to be game changing and it's going to actually take over the system somehow and one day we'll price things in Bitcoin, which just ain't the case. That's not going to happen. They don't want it to be an asset that is used as a currency. That's what they're most terrified of. That was the key thing for them, is that we didn't use it as a currency, because then it really is a threat to the system. But as an asset that people just hold, they hodl, they want to see the price go up, they speculate, that's not an issue to them. That's not something that they're bothered about, which is why we saw all the ETFs. They kind of transitioned it towards that. And that's because they can control that. You know, it's on a digital highway. If they're sat there now, Rick, and they're right, well, by 2030 we want to have digital IDs. We're going to connect your online identity to your real identity. You're only going to access that internet with our say so. Then, of course, an asset like Bitcoin is the worst thing as an investment, because the only way you can use it is to identify yourself and put yourself in their system. So they ain't scared of it because they've got a plan for it. That's the fundamental bottom line on this. And the other thing that they're doing now is the new presidency under Donald Trump. He's hired a guy called Howard Lutnick as his Secretary of Commerce. Now, Howard Lutnick, he's a very interesting character. He actually is the CEO of a firm called Cantor Fitzgerald. Now, these are a massive, massive firm. They actually, in the year around the circa 2000 time, they accounted for 70% of all US Treasury transactions. So they were actually the broker for all these treasuries. Now, what's happening now is these stable coins, which for people who don't know what they are, a stable coin is like a Bitcoin, but it's actually tied to the dollar. So they're tying these stable coins to currencies. So every USDT, I think it's called, or Tether, I call it, is valued at $1, and it's meant to be backed by a dollar. Now, what's happening in the US right now is all of these stable coins, because there's a multi array of them, they are now putting all of their reserves into US debt. Now, for those that don't know, the US has a huge debt problem. It's in 36 trillion, Rick, and it's set to go up massively under Trump. It went up 40% under his first presidency. Biden added another 8 trillion. We're going into that financial endgame where the whole system is under threat. It's going to have a debt collapse at some point, or they're going to hyperinflate. That's how it's always resolved. It's not a conspiracy. Just read your monetary history. You'll find, oh, we're exactly there on this timeline. We're going into the debt collapse phase. So the US is a really big problem. The problem is they have to fund themselves going on. But countries like China, countries like Russia, and most of their allies, they're de-dollarizing. They're getting rid of dollars and they're buying gold. If you look at what's happened, for example, in Central and Eastern Europe, they've increased their gold reserves over the past 3 or 4 years by around 500%. Now they're doing that, Rick, because they understand that those paper currencies are going to zero. They're going to collapse at some point. And the US dollar isn't going to be here in 50 years, not in the same form. So in their desperation, what the US is doing is they're taking these stable coins, and instead of prosecuting them for their long list of financial crimes, because most of them are corrupt as hell, they're based out of the Cayman Islands or the British Virgin Islands. And if you read through their history, they're shockingly corrupt entities. I mean, they're worth billions and billions, but they're shockingly corrupt. And what they've essentially done to these guys is said, right, if you guys buy US treasuries, we'll look after you. And that's what this new Trump presidency is about. All this crypto and Bitcoin, it's not to save you and it's not to make you rich. It's to help the US, because the higher the price of Bitcoin goes, the higher the reserves of these stable coins go. And the higher the reserves of the stable coins go, the more US debt can be bought by them. And this and Howard Lutnick, he's the key player in this as well, because he actually holds all of those treasuries for these stable coin companies. So what you can see, what they've actually done, Rick, is under the guise of making people rich, under the guise of making giving you freedom with Bitcoin. No, what it's really about is about US debt. It's very cynical. They're trying to keep the system going even longer, and they want to do it with your support, with your say so. And it's kind of a satanic inversion to me, because the asset that people are turning to try and protect themselves from inflation and from that US debt bomb is Bitcoin. But ironically, now that is going to be the asset that helps to perpetuate that system and keep it going for some time. Now, I'm not against Bitcoin like you. I think that people should invest in what they want to invest in. I think people should certainly try and protect and increase their wealth. But like you, I also think we have to have a realistic view. And sometimes you have to just peer beneath the surface of it a bit. And when you do, you say, oh, actually, what they're telling me is going on, it's not quite, it's not quite the truth.
Yeah, I'm like yourself. I don't tell people that they should definitively do this or they should definitively do that. I believe in providing people with information, balanced information, and then letting them come to their own conclusions. So, like I said, I'm not. This isn't a hating on Bitcoin piece. It's a sort of a let's have a warts and all look at it. What are some of the pros and what are some of the cons? And somebody once said to me, "Don't invest, never invest something into something that whatever you can't afford to lose on it." I think the problem is there's a lot of hype behind this at the minute, Mike. And a lot of people with no knowledge whatsoever of what it is or what it's about are starting to feel like this FOMO, fear of missing out. They're starting to, cash in other investments or liquidize investments and go into this because they believe it's going to the moon. They believe it's going to $1 million. And people are coming out with stupid statements saying there's no doubt about it. Bitcoin's going to $1 million. Well, there is doubt about it. There's no guarantees. You might believe it's going to a million, but you can't guarantee that that'll happen any more than you or I can't guarantee that it's actually going to go to zero or it's going to go into the abyss. It could go either way. But before you go into it, you need to go into it with your eyes open. And there's an old saying, my granny used to say that a fool and their money are easily parted. And one example of this, I don't know if you've seen this story this week or not, but there's a lot of these meme coins are springing up out of nowhere. What are they even? People don't know what they are. Oh, I want some of that. There was one that was released here. Haley Welsh, a girl called Haley Welsh, who become infamous on the internet as the so-called Hawk Tuah girl. What a way to be known, eh? What a legacy. She launched a Hawk meme coin and ragged investors for $50 million. And this was being supported by some big crypto people, and they were getting behind her, and there was a huge promotional thing behind this. But the bottom line is, over the last few weeks, that has exploded and collapsed, and people are left out, collectively to the tunes of tens of millions of dollars. Fools in their money, easily parted.
Yeah, that's it, Rick. And right now, there's a lot of people out there who, like you said, they're seeing the numbers go up and they're seeing that other people might have said, oh, I got 400%, I got this, that. And they want a part of that. They want a piece of it because it's FOMO. And FOMO really comes out of greed. It's greed. I want, I need, I have to have. And I've never invested with that mindset, and I would advise people to not invest with that mindset. It's extremely toxic. And one thing that you find when you look at the history of investing, or if you do it yourself for a long period of time, is the behaviors that give people those crazy outside returns are exactly the same behaviors and reason why they lose it all in the end game. And the reason for that, Rick, is because going back to the title of your show, actually, risk versus reward. If you're risk managing, you don't get returns of thousands of percent regularly. You might get an occasional lucky break, where something really takes off and you did your due diligence and it just turned out to be a fantastic investment. But the average money manager, the professionals, we're talking the professionals, 95% of them don't beat the market, and the market gets around 9% average returns each year. If you could make 20% a year for 10 years, Rick, you'd be one of the best in the world. You'd be you'd be in the top 2 or 3 money managers in the world. 20% a year, every year. So the idea that you're going to get thousands of percent and take that with you and you're going to keep it all, that's not how it works. When you take the brakes off a car, you can go a few hundred miles an hour until that wall comes, then you ain't stopping. And that's the way it works in investing. Now, when it comes to meme coins and all that stuff, if you're going to speculate, you have to treat it as a speculation. And when it's a speculation, I always say to me personally, if I'm doing it, it's going to be like under 1% of my investment, or it'd be far less than that even, because the chances of it going wrong are really high. Now that means I ain't going to get $1 billion off $100, and I don't think many people actually do, Rick. I think it's a fantasy. Maybe there's somebody out there, bought Doggy Coin at 0.001 and then it went up to, but they're so rare. Like, it's like trying to win the lottery. So I think with speculations, it's gambling. It's just a form of gambling. Accept it. You're not a hotshot investor for getting $1,000 on your $100. You're not a hotshot. You're just gambling and guessing and playing the game. And as long as you're honest with yourself, then when it goes wrong, if it goes wrong, you can say to yourself, well, I knew what I was getting myself into. And if you manage to get out with some of that money, fantastic. But in general, the guys who are making all that money, it's the really shrewd shark investors. It's the Hawk Tuah girls who are scamming their audience, and this crypto space is the most corrupt space in the world. And that's what it is. It's a load of sharks at the top, dangling that meat in the water. No, should have said someone at the top dangling the meat and all the
Yeah.
sharks, circling. And
Networking is very important, obviously, and I've noticed there is a very virulent network getting together of people that are just completely evangelical about crypto and Bitcoin. And again, listen, if that's you, I'm not knocking it. I'm very evangelical about it. Things a lot of people think I'm crazy about. So each to their own, each to their own. But just to flesh out the story a little bit more with this Hawk coin, it was also promoted in conjunction with allegedly the Jake Paul, who's a fantastic self-promoter. In the boxing front, he's just come off of a huge fight with, or fight in inverted commas with Mike Tyson that was screened on Netflix. He helped to promote this girl. His history includes SEC charges in 2023 for undisclosed crypto promotions and involvement in NFT projects like Sacred Devils, for example. Another person, Mark Cuban, who people may be aware of in the crypto sphere, a big name in cryptocurrency world, got involved with the Hawk meme coin project, bringing his massive audience along for the ride. This article says his endorsement added credibility, but it didn't end well for the followers. And all I'm saying is I'm very wary. I used to work in finance for a long time. I worked for an insurance company. I worked for a bank, and then I was self-employed as a financial planner. And when I went out, Mike, and talked to you, for example, or a customer about investing, I was very passionate about it, extremely passionate about it. People thought, "Hey, man, you really believe in that?" And yes, I did. But I was also getting paid quite handsomely for the advice that I was giving, and also for the investments that were rolling into the bank or my investment business off the back of it. So there has to be some kind of kickback. People aren't just doing it for the love of other people and just for the love of having a stable off-grid community that the government can't touch. So there's webs in this, and I'm seeing webs, little webs starting to form. Little spiders are starting to weave webs that never spoke about this stuff before. Now all of a sudden they're on pumping it. It's going to $1 million. It's going to the moon. It's like, you never talked about this before. How come you flipped all of a sudden and become a crypto loon? I don't know, but I'm just saying there's schemes and plans with everything in life, and it seems to be this market is rife for abuse and also for fleecing people left, right, and center.
yeah, for sure. I mean, because it's still relatively unregulated as well, they can get away with it. I mean, if, for example, you look at someone like Elon Musk when he was pumping like Dogecoin and then he was pumping Bitcoin, like that's technically illegal, Rick. If somebody pumps stocks like that to their audience on such a massive platform, they'd be put in jail because you're manipulating the markets essentially. And he could, of course, just say, right, I'm going to put 100 million into this coin. I'm going to tweet about it tomorrow. It's going to go up, then I'm going to sell. Like that is a scam. It's a fraud. But yeah, they're all doing it. And, it's just a dirty space, Rick. I mean, you try and pick the cleanest shit out of the basket in that, good luck. I mean, Bitcoin is the one that people turn to because it's got the history and it does have that credibility because it was started, or at least the original community was quite
Yeah.
anarchistic, which is awesome. But a lot of that community now cannot stand the space. They really hate it. I've got a good friend, um, and he was one of those originals, and he said, I just can't bear to see what it's become. This whole have fun staying poor, this narcissistic, ego, greed driven mindset. And I'm like, yeah, and that's all the hallmarks of the bad people. That's the kind of stuff they would do. They'd turn it from that into this. And therefore, I don't think it's going to have that outcome. I think what it's probably going to end up as is something that tricks people into being into an asset that can be controlled or even destroyed once they reset the system. I think that's where it's going to end up. And that would make perfect sense, right, Rick? Do you think that they want us to be financially capable and rich going into the end of
Hell
this
no.
financial system, or do you think they've got worse plans for us? I think it's
Hell
pretty bad.
no. Hell no. And just to give people again, because this is something that happened, very recently with this Hawk coin. So you had the celebrity endorsements, you had a face to put to this coin. So with endorsements and overnight fame fueling ambition, the crypto craze Hawk was launched. Then what happened next was pure chaos. I'm just reading from an article here taking the hype and drama to an entirely new level. So the Hawk meme coin launched and rapidly hit a $500 million, $500 million market cap within minutes. right? Within minutes. So, usually when you invest in a company, you like to look at a balance sheet, you like to look at profit and loss, how much debt do they have, what area are they working in, what are their overheads, do they have any tax liabilities, before you invest in something. But in this case, some internet girl bouncing around in a hooded top, boo, like this, is jumping around in her house with her phone, telling people to invest, and it launched and hit $500 million within minutes, only to crash and lose 95% of its value in the next 5 minutes. So if you'd have piled in on the spike on that one, 5 minutes later, you'd have been fleeced to the tune of 95% of your investments. Minutes after the shocking rug pull, Haley shared a post addressing the fallout and concerns surrounding hawk tokenomics. In her message, she urged users to copy and paste her statement, offering an explanation for what had just happened. There's no point in giving somebody an explanation when they've just been ruined financially. You can explain it all you like, but the bottom line is it was a scam. It was well orchestrated, well backed, and well promoted. And sadly, there were winners and losers in this one, and the people that were having the apology posted to them most certainly were not the winners.
Yeah, so how shocking, Rick, that a morally bankrupt gal who became famous for being morally bankrupt then does something morally bankrupt and everyone loses their money. I mean, what were those people thinking when they bought a coin called Hawk Tour from a gal who is famous for what we know she's
Yeah.
famous for? I mean, come on. I mean, there was another coin as well recently. I don't know if you heard about Peanut the squirrel coin, that little squirrel that they killed. He got his own coin that was up to 1 billion, Rick, in a day. So again, people don't know what they're doing. They're trading back and forth magic beans with each other. It's the greater fool theory that some idiot's going to come along who was more foolish than I was. And no offense to the audience, but I think we have to be honest. What these things are is just digital dogcraft. That's what it is.
Yeah.
There are some that have utility, though. And I would say, if you look at coins like, for example, XRP, which is one that people were saying to me for a long time, Mike, XRP is the one. That's the one you should be buying. And it's got a utility. That thing is actually being used right now as the base layer for 9 central bank digital currencies trial. So if you want to know what's really going on, you are the test subject and you're also the financier of CBDCs when you buy those things. And I said to the people with XRP, I said, I said, I'm not going to buy XRP. I said, are you crazy? Those guys literally are telling me that they're creating a central bank digital currency using their platform. There's 9 of them being trialed on it. And you want me to invest in that? It'd be like investing in Pfizer, knowing that there's going to be a new jab, and
Yeah.
it's going to hurt a lot of people are investing in a drone company that's going to go bomb some gardens. I was like, no, there's got to be some ethics here as well, guys. Just because there's money on the table doesn't mean that you should be throwing yourself at it. There's something bigger at play in life. And it's not going to matter how many zeros you've got in your bank account if they're all centrally controlled zeros. So I just urge caution on that too. That we have to think about there is a morality to life, in my opinion, Rick, and I don't want to fund certain things that they are literally telling me are going to create a technocracy around.
Yeah, and also, by the way, there are, not every coin's the same. They're all different. People think Bitcoin is cryptocurrency. There's so many different coins out there, meme coin, stable coin, you name it. We're just touching on some of the basics here at this point in time. And you talk about ethics as well and morality there that, in an ideal world, Mike, you shouldn't be tempted. Okay, well, XRP, it's the basis for CBDCs. I'm against CBDCs, but hey, I could make 1,000% on this in 12 months and I'm kind of broke at the minute. All of a sudden, morality can go out the window, and that's understandable. I get that because they say everybody has a price. I remember hearing a story once about, to highlight this, everybody has a price, about an old man who had an old vintage Ferrari, and a collector found out about this, and he said, I really want that car. So he found out where this old man lived. He went and he visited him. He said, listen, I hear you have a such and such model of Ferrari. I want to buy it. And the old man said, well, it's not for sale. It's not for sale. I've had it all my life. It's very precious to me. It's not for sale. So he said, look, I'll give you $200,000 for it. He said, you didn't hear me. it's not for sale. So anyway, the guy went away and he came. He said, I need to go back. I'm going to offer him more money. So he said, listen, I've thought about it. 200K might have been a low ball offer. I'll give you 500,000 for it. He said, it's not for sale. I can't stress this enough for you. So away he went again. He thought, you know what? I'm going to come back and I'm going to really bust him with this offer. And he came back. He said, I'm going to give you $2 million for it. The old man said, sold. Right? So everybody has a price. And talking about the word of God, the Bible says that the love of money is the root of all evil. Okay, not money itself. The love of money is the root of all evil. And I understand if people are getting it tight. I understand people are looking for gains. I understand that it's a very uncertain world out there. But I think really what I'm trying to do here today, Mike, is I'm not ragging on Bitcoin or XRP or gold for that matter, or meme coins even. If people want to dive into those things, let them do it, but let them do it with open eyes and let them do it with balanced advice. Listen to the pros, the people that are really for it. Listen to the cons, the people that are really against it, and then listen to people that have, an open mind that it could go either way. And I think that's really what I'm trying to do. Highlight the madness of these meme coins that are springing up against the established long-term existing vehicles there, for example, Bitcoin and XRP and Ethereum and what have you. Do your research before you do anything.
Yeah, well, yeah. And just to bookend that, Rick, one last comment and a question to you. What was the best performing stock in 1920? Do you know?
I'm going to go for Coca-Cola.
No, I don't think it was. I think it would have probably been back then. I'm guessing it would have been an automobile company. I can't tell you. Do you know what the best performing stock in 1850 was?
No.
What about 1790? I can guarantee you every single one of them doesn't exist today. Or if it does exist, General Motors still exists, right? So General Motors was a stock that came around the 1920s in that original automobile boom. But every time we get a new technology, whether it was the railway boom, there was a railway boom in 1850 where they deregulated all of the railways, and all of a sudden the government was allowing everyone and anyone to build railways. They were giving them land away for next to nothing to build these railways. 90% of them never got built. And of the railroads that did get built, half of them went to nowhere. They were just random bits of rail. And the same thing happened with canals about 100 years prior to that. The same thing happened during the automobile boom in the 20s. The same thing happened in the 2000s with the dot-com bubble, where again you had all of this deregulation, random websites that were going up to billions of dollars valuations without even ever selling a product. My point is, the same thing happens throughout history. Every time there's new technologies, you have these big bubbles around it. You have a lot of people speculating. You have crazy valuations. And then 15, 20 years later, most of them don't exist. Most of them go to zero. And the one that was the one at the time where everyone said, that's the one. That's the one that's going to win. That's the one you should own. It never is the case. They always change hands. And when you've got technology developing so fast, I just really can't see most of these things, including Bitcoin, being anything of anything in 15 years. The technology will be so far ahead by that point. And unfortunately, so will society going towards the technocracy. That ain't going to end. That ain't going to stop, which is why I prefer to have solutions for privacy and financial decentralization that are not connected to the internet, that are not connected to the energy grid. I think if that's what you're looking for, go somewhere else. If you're looking for speculation, if you're looking for mania, if you're looking for the potential to get rich, there you go. That's the space.
A lot of people will be sitting going, that sounds just like what I want. Other people will be saying, I'm going to not touch that one with the barge pole. Mike, we're going to call time in this one for now because I wanted to focus in this one particular area, although, you'd need 3 or 4 hours to even focus in on just one little aspect of this. But let me direct people your way. Please check out the description box underneath this video. Check out the pinned comment. There'll be links through to Mike's website, also his Substack page. And if you're thinking, well, this guy seems like a bit of a smart ass, he seems to know it all, so what does he propose? Go and check out his Substack and see what he proposes. And then again, you might think he's talking through his backside. You might think I am. In that case, just discount everything that we've said, but at least it's an alternate take on what the hype and the mania is at the minute and the things that are being pushed very heavily, not just online, but offline also. So, Mike, thank you so very much for your insights. It's been a blast, as always, talking with you. And yeah, please contact or connect with Mike and show him some love and support through the links in the comments box. But as per now, that's Parallel Mike. I'm Rick Munn. This is No Risk, No Reward Media, over and out.